Helldivers 2. This game has a checkered history and, honestly, kind of a checkered present. As of sometime last month, Sony finally waived the requirement for a PlayStation account to be linked, meaning the game is now fully worldwide once more. Having been admiring it from afar, I finally picked it up on the summer sale, and since then, I have done nothing but kill bots for 30 character levels. Look at that. 6,000 automatons killed, 0 terminids or squids. I should probably work on that. Lovely. It's honestly still kinda rough. Fairly significant glitches still pop up regularly. Use the in-game chat function and you'll unequip every weapon. Sometimes aiming gets broken and you won't be able to see what you're looking at due to animation lock. Whatever the hell this is. And I'm legitimately frightened that the weapon customization screen is going to fry my graphics card because it keeps crashing the game and then causing all my audio to distort until I restart my computer. Also, the fog and smoke is dialed way too high and I can't figure out how to turn it down. Seriously, on some guns, the muzzle smoke prevents me from seeing if I'm hitting targets. They are a little more serious than nitpicks, but it ultimately doesn't ruin the experience. As for PC performance, it's a bit of a hardware hog, but on a 5-year-old RX 5700 it ran in the 40s most of the time and might have run a bit better if I hadn't turned off the resolution scaling options. But those options, as well as the native anti-aliasing, caused a lot of visual ghosting, so I turned them off and eventually just caved and bought a 16GB RX 9060 XT. When this game had its ad spot at E3 showcasing the Ministry of Truth recruitment broadcast that is now the game's intro cinematic, I could not have cared less. As charming as it was just a cinematic. This game really needs to be seen in action to understand what it's all about. Of course, the launch of the game was dampened by the PlayStation account requirement, which prevented anyone from playing. Then was waived, then was reinstituted, then was waived again, and then reinstituted. And then finally waived again, but now the game is coming to Xbox, so if they still require a PlayStation account again at some point, it'll at least be really funny. But how is the actual game? Freedom! It's a co-op chaos shooter. You know the type. Payday, Killing Floor, Left 4 Dead. Fans of Deep Rock Galactic in particular will feel right at home here, although I technically think it has more in common with Warframe. Friendly fire is on, and honestly expected, to the point that the stat screen simply calls them accidentals. But we're all in this together, and so long as you exist on the field and aren't dying every 30 seconds to something that isn't friendly fire artillery, you're contributing. Stick with the group and shoot bots, bugs, or boatless. Call in some stratagems, tag some objectives on the map, or just completely ignore the mission and sprint a kilometer away looking for points of interest like the almighty butt plug rock. Nobody will complain because this nets everyone in the entire squad upgrade materials and premium currency. The only thing you actually need to survive the mission for is samples. Helldivers are expendable, and extraction is optional. You have 40 minutes for regular missions and 12 minutes for blitz or eradication missions, and in that time, you must complete the main objectives.
You have been a stalwart line of freedom. Extract when ready.
Will be rewarded for completing sub-objectives and clearing outposts, and once the timer is down, your respawn budget is reduced to nothing. You can do any combination of activities in whatever order you wish, and when it's time to go, head to the extraction point and call in for Mom to pick you up from school, and a legally distinct pelican from Halo that is literally called a pelican will touch down to take you away. If you want to know the vibe of the game, all you really need to do is watch the loading screen for like 10 seconds.
Looking one, beginning ascent. Today you've carved another foot in a long climb to liberty.
This game is all about excessive pageantry, and I love excessive pageantry. I don't just mean the heroic fanfare, although that is a big part of it. The feedback this game provides is exceptional. Anything that is worth killing or destroying explodes, so as a rule of thumb, the more things that are blowing up, the better you are doing. While relying on airstrikes, grenades, and rocket launchers is a legitimate strategy, this game's lower-level gunplay is also incredible. The sound effects to guns are really meaty, and the hit markers on your crosshair are artisanal, giving gray feedback for hits, red feedback for hits on weak points, with a special indicator if your shots are being fully blocked by armor. All guns handle differently, and if your computer can survive the menu, the gun customization allows you to fine-tune each gun to your playstyle. And there is a lot to fine-tune because the gunplay is really in-depth. Any game that simulates bullet in chamber is really going for it. This game not only has toggles for semi, burst, and auto, some guns can even have their fire rate changed or their sighting adjusted, and most default weapons can toggle their flashlights. For the majority of guns in the game, your exact ammo count is not visible under normal circumstances. You have a progress bar in the shape of a magazine instead. Reloading will discard any ammunition remaining in that magazine, save for the bullet in the chamber, and if there is a bullet in the chamber when reloading, the reload cycle is sped up by 1 stage, and you get +1 bullets to your capacity. This is very realistic. Reloading also happens in stages, so any interruption to reloading allows the reload to resume from the last stage that was not completed, which is a real lifesaver sometimes. Some guns do allow for a round-by-round reload, but even those don't provide exact ammo count in the HUD. If you absolutely need to know your remaining bullets, you can hold reload to check your current count, but you can't fire while doing this. I know this may sound like a lot to manage, and that's why gunplay has a bit of a learning curve, but resupply is pretty plentiful, and there's a lot of ammo pickups and missions to pad it out, so you don't need to worry too much about wastage. You can run and gun, but you won't hit anything, sometimes shooting more than 90 degrees off target because you hadn't even turned around yet. Get a nasty shot in the shoulder, and you may even shoot the teammate next to you because it threw off your aim just that much. How long it takes to actually train your gun on target is accounted for, and the lighter and smaller the gun is, the faster you can redirect, meaning that larger and more powerful guns can be more powerful, with the trade-off that they will be less versatile. This game can turn into absolute chaos at higher difficulties, and the ability to turn on a dime and unload in 4 different directions in 10 seconds can be life or death. Stability, recoil, and how much getting shot or being near an explosion influences your aim is also affected by stance. If you're looking to make precise shots, you will need to take a knee every time, and you would not believe how satisfying the ritual of taking a knee, waiting for your gun to line up, and then timing your shots becomes. As if that wasn't enough, you can also aim down sights on every single gun. You can't play the entire game in first person, but it adds a whole new dimension to combat. Aiming down sights dramatically increases accuracy but gives you tunnel vision, leaving you open to attack. Unlike many other games in which going ADS makes you laser accurate in a blink, here your gun movements will still be held back by the ergonomics of your gun. In extreme cases, moving too quickly can obscure your sight window entirely. Your trajectory in ADS is subtly different from that of regular aimed fire. From certain positions, your regular aiming will hit obstacles in the way. However, if you don't change your aim at all but go to ADS, you will now have a clear shot. It takes a bit of getting used to. Going fully prone takes a second. Or you can action dive, which will send you fully prone from standing instantly. Just don't do it off a cliff, because this is not Metal Gear Solid 5. Being prone is great for accuracy and recoil, but it also really harms your ability to turn your gun around quickly. But, most importantly, you would not believe how durable you are while prone. Bots will barely be able to hit you with gunfire, and you can survive practically any explosion. But being prone is functionally a death sentence if you are being hit by melee enemies, so there's a time and a place for it. Although the combat may look really over the top, there is a legitimate place in here for the dedicated sniper team. The only thing that feels better than having enemies menacingly bearing down on you only for a bolt from the blue to annihilate them from off-screen is to be the angel on someone's shoulder who is doing that for someone else. It's pretty simple to find a high point, post up with a decent long-range gun, and provide supporting sniper fire. In anything but eradication missions, the mission area is large enough to make range play important. And even there, if you pick your spot well and surround yourself with sentries, you can hold your ground pretty damn well just by lying down and swiveling to every new threat. It's thrilling. And because of course it does, sniper fire has to account for bullet drop and travel time. Seriously, this game is a shockingly good milsim if you're into that sort of thing. This is also not a game in which assault and machine guns are inaccurate bullet hoses. They have a high rate of fire and heavy recoil, yes, but used appropriately, a standard issue Liberator is a formidable medium-range marksman rifle capable of making weak point shots at significant ranges while still having really good DPS when being assaulted up close. Probably the most important aspect to consider for weapons is their armor penetration rating. All enemies have an armor rating for each individual part of their body, and if your weapon meets its armor rating for penetration, it deals 2/3 damage. If it exceeds it, it deals 100% damage. And if it falls below it, it won't do anything at all. This is especially important for the bots, with their tanks and hulks that don't present a viable weak point for the majority of weapons unless you have them flanked. Hulks have a very small heavy armor weak point where their eyes are, but the rest needs anti-tank penetration. Face one of these alone without a support weapon, and your only real options are Thermite or the Lale-Lule-Lo. Careful with these things though, while it can penetrate heavy armor, its damage really isn't sufficient to take out the kinds of things you'd want to kill with it. I do like to fight the bots with one of these in a Deadeye lever action because it's massive damage per shot and great stagger, but to quote a famous gun merchant, a proper weapon isn't about shooting, it's about reloading. Still, certain guns are better on certain war fronts. The bots really want you to take anti-tank weaponry, the bugs favor a balanced composition of pea shooters and howitzers, and squids really just want high DPS that can also pierce medium armor. They're basically hard countered by the MG43 machine gun, which is a base stratagem you don't even need to unlock, and is often literally just found lying on the ground. Speaking of which, stratagems are a big part of this game. Stratagems are called in by inputting directional codes and then throwing a beacon. I advise switching your stratagem input button away from your movement buttons so that you can freely move while inputting these, as otherwise you just become an easy target. Be careful though, as sprinting while inputting stratagems, it's really easy to go beyond the amount of key presses that your keyboard can recognize at once, which causes whiffed inputs. Switching to toggle sprint will help with this. You get to choose 4 stratagems per mission, per player, and hoo boy can that be a tough choice for every slot. There's a variety of different stratagems, with the most common type being, please make this explode. But they also serve as additional weaponry, supplies, equipment, and automated turrets. Creating a balanced composition of air support and logistics stratagems is a deeply personal choice, which for most people largely boils down to Eagle 500 kg bomb, orbital laser, and then 2 slots of personal preference. Probably 1 sentry and 1 support weapon or backpack. Alongside your stratagems, you also have a booster. This is a power-up applied to all members of the squad, not just you, and you won't have any by default. 2 divers can't select the same one, so you may end up jostling for position a bit. Vitality booster is pretty solid. Hellpod space optimization is nice, but ultimately pointless unless you expect to die constantly. Stamina booster is generally pleasant, and the rest all have decent niche uses, except for fire pods, which is basically just straight up trolling at this point. Every Helldiver has 2 equipment slots that are not filled by default, a backpack slot and a support weapon slot. Support weapons are heavy weapons like anti-tank missile launchers, grenade launchers, machine guns, some energy weapons, and the fan favorite railgun. You don't get to spawn in with these. If you want a specific one, it will need to be one of the 4 stratagems you take in, and you have to call down a Hellpod in order to spawn it for your use. You can share them, however. Also, many support weapons can be found in missions, so using a stratagem slot for something other than a support weapon, and then working with what you find on site, can be quite effective and thrilling. Many, if not all, support weapons can also be resupplied using ammo pickups, so sharing them is feasible. Some support weapons need to use a backpack slot to be reloaded, and carry the additional ammunition that they need. These can also be cooperatively operated for additional fire rate, but that's not very common because it makes you a gigantic opportunity target. In fact, I don't think I've ever actually seen it done. Other stratagems such as the guard dog take up a backpack slot in order to provide sentry fire that follows you around. I love this thing. Also, you can get a supply pack which functionally duplicates supply spawns from the supply stratagem, portable energy shields, a portable ballistic shield literally no one uses, or a rogue nuclear weapon. The important interplay at work here is that you cannot effectively use a support weapon that requires a backpack while also using a backpack support item unless you get help from a friend. Also, support weapons that can be found on the field never require a backpack, so if you choose a backpack stratagem, you can freely use found support weapons without worry. I do this a lot, and I like how it forces me outside my comfort zone a bit. Mission stratagems don't take a stratagem slot to use, and no matter the mission, you will always have access to Reinforce, Resupply, and SOS Beacon. Reinforce is what you use to trigger allied player respawns. You have a fixed number of them, and then a lengthy cooldown for more if that becomes exhausted. The Resupply stratagem is functionally identical to the way they work in Deep Rock, but has a cooldown rather than requiring materials. But this cooldown is shared between the party. It drops down 4 supply boxes which a diver can grab to loosely halfway refill their stims, ammo, grenades, and various other sundries. The SOS beacon basically just turns on online matchmaking. Throw it down if you want more bodies on the field. In certain circumstances, you may also access the Hell Bomb stratagem, which drops a nuclear bomb that must be manually armed with a 10-second fuse. And yes, that is as terrifying and incredible as it sounds. But mostly you can only do this to big enemy bases that cannot be destroyed by other means. What's great about stratagems is that while they are basically just telling someone else to do it, there is some depth and risk to actually using offensive stratagems. To start, you have to have the time to pull up your stratagem display and input the code sequence correctly. In a situation where you are being heavily assaulted, this can actually be incredibly difficult. Also, once you do input the correct code, the stratagem is now live and in your hand. If you get knocked down, it gets primed, and that has the lovely consequence of meaning that you are now the mayor of Explosion Town. A fumbled strat marker can legitimately wipe a team, and that means you need to hold on to these things for as short a period as possible. Lastly, it's limited by your throwing range. You can throw a good distance, but precision throwing is an art. You have to account for bouncing, and you also gotta get pretty close to the target while carrying a 500 kilogram hot potato. Every stratagem has a cooldown, and that becomes a significant consideration into how useful they actually are. Patriot exosuits are really cool, but you can't take both types at the same time. The cooldown is 10 minutes, and you'll burn through the ammo in 2. There's no time for this. Some especially powerful stratagems also have a limited number of uses, such as the orbital laser only being available 3 times, and also having a long-ish cooldown. Orbital barrages are kind of a mixed bag. They are strong but rather imprecise. They take a while to actually deploy, and they are also fired from the trajectory of your superdestroyer. And if there's a good way to know which of the superdestroyers in the sky is yours, I haven't heard it. Orbital strikes really need line of sight between your superdestroyer and the target and come down at a loosely 45-degree angle most of the time, which makes them at best a gamble and at worst completely worthless when using them in the super metropolis zones, which obstruct line of sight with super skyscrapers. Thrown into this mix are the Eagle stratagems, deceptively useful if properly understood and invested in. You see, each Eagle stratagem has a set number of uses and a surprisingly low cooldown and quick response time, but this comes at the cost of a rearm cooldown. You can use as many charges of each Eagle stratagem as you have equipped, and once they are all fully expended, a 2.5-minute global cooldown is triggered in which you can't use any of them. Or you can send it back manually to rearm them all ahead of time. This basically means that using more Eagle stratagems together gets you more value for that rearm time, but not all Eagle stratagems are created equal. Everyone loves the 500 kilogram bomb, but the airstrike is pretty inconsistent and the strafing run can feel very toothless at times. Also, there's the sentry turrets, pretty much required for eradication missions. These are stratagems with intermediate length cooldowns that have limited ammo, and can be destroyed by enemies, players, or even each other. Used poorly, these things are a nightmare for friendly fire, but used correctly, they are the line between life and death when the going gets tough. A well-placed mortar sentry is pivotal both in operation but also in strategy, as they can take out swarms of smaller enemies before you even know they exist. Rocket sentries will take down bot dropships with ease, and even larger armored enemies, and the autocannon turret will destroy everything around it including you. The autocannon turret is basically the blanket solution to high difficulty bot missions. I always feel naked without one of these things currently active. Be careful though, because turrets can be destroyed if not placed well, and if you throw down a turret that blows up instantly, that is going to be the longest 2.5 minutes of your life. The raw amount of damage that turrets put out is above and beyond pretty much any other stratagem, save for perhaps the orbital laser, so knowing when and where to place one is essential. Some stratagems might at first glance appear to be useless. For instance, at least at launch, the community simply did not care for the machine gun or the machine gun sentry. However, the machine gun drops regularly in points of interest and doesn't require a backpack slot. It can pierce medium armor and has a lot of ammo and a generous magazine size. Also, I'm sure not a lot of people know this, but by holding reload to open up the weapons setting menu, you can upgrade this thing from full auto to fuller auto. Sure, now you basically can't hit the broadside of a barn unless you're prone, but you would not believe the work that it can put in when you are. And the machine gun sentry is great against the squids because that warfront mostly just cares about raw bullets downrange, and having a Gatling sentry and a machine gun sentry is a damn fine firing line. Which leads into discussing the primary gameplay loop and character progression, and boy howdy does this game have enough currencies to make a gacha game blush. Keep in mind that for all intents and purposes you are not upgrading your Helldiver, you are upgrading your Super Destroyer, and you are actually playing as an endless line of 18-year-old recruits being fed through the meat grinder by this ship. Helldivers are kept in cryosleep, and the way that they are fed by a belt into the bridge of a ship only to be fired onto the surface of a planet is almost poetically similar to bullets being fed into a gun's chamber. It's absolutely metal, if not depressing. The good news is that you never lose progression from death. The bad news is, you're not making it back home, buddy. Let's start from the top. Experience. This is granted for doing basically anything, and higher difficulty missions have a higher multiplier. 0% at trivial, 100% at extreme, 300% at super helldive. XP is important, right up until it isn't. Functionally, it stops doing anything once you reach level 25. However, this XP is also granted to your primary weapons, which will unlock additional skins and weapon mod options. But that also caps out at level 25, so XP is mostly an afterthought. For bragging rights, you can hit level cap of 150, but that'll take me a minute. Everything that grants XP also grants requisition slips, and those sources scale with difficulty as well, but you can also just find the stuff lying around sometimes in points of interest. Rec slips have a surprisingly low cap of 50,000, and some bigger ticket unlocks require 35,000, so you are going to be constantly burning through it just to not have wastage. This is a trick the game uses in a few places. It's mostly spent on new stratagems, some ship modules also take rec slips, and weapon customization is shockingly expensive, but by the time you've gotten to the point of micromanaging your guns, you'll have nothing else to spend it on. Unless rec slips are found as loot drops and points of interest, you have to complete the mission to get them and the XP that is granted by objectives and destroying outposts. You don't have to survive or even extract, just complete the main mission objective, and then either extract or run completely dry on reinforcements. The XP bonus for extracting with all divers isn't even worth mentioning. This is not a leave no dwarf behind situation. Just make sure someone escapes carrying all the delicious samples. Samples come in 3 types: common, rare, and super samples. You may have already guessed which of these 3 sample types is the most difficult and important to acquire. That's right, it's the common samples. Common samples are needed for all ship module upgrades, and you'll need just shy of 4,000 of them in total, but missions can drop like 40. And that's assuming you find all of them. I don't know if I've ever done a mission in which all the common samples were found, because while they may be everywhere, they aren't necessarily in the places you'd want to look. Rare samples start spawning in challenging difficulty and are found in points of interest, enemy outposts, and in loot boxes like rescue pods and bunkers. People prioritize finding these kinds of locations because they can drop very lucrative items like super credits and war bond medals. Rare samples that spawn in this way are not considered part of the map's initial budget of rare samples, meaning that you can technically acquire more rare samples per mission than the game spawns. It's not uncommon to extract from a mission with more rare samples then common samples, and the total amount you need to acquire for all upgrades is 2,900, so you'll generally be pretty flush with these things. Super samples start spawning at extreme difficulty and have a very fixed spawn rate, 2 to 7 per mission depending on the difficulty. Extreme missions drop 2 or 3, and that's where you'll be spending most of your time. These samples are not too difficult to find, because there is only one place that they spawn, which is under these giant rocks that you can see from across the entire map, if you know what you're looking for. You need 305 of these things, which means about 100 extreme difficulty missions. But you can only carry like 100 at a time, and you'll need the common samples to spend alongside them, so there will be a lot of wastage. Speaking of wastage, samples are special in that you need to actually carry them out of the mission with you. Any other resource is locked in as soon as it's picked up. You don't even need to complete the mission to keep super credits or medals that you found. Samples are also weird in that each person carries all the samples they've collected so far, and you can't actually see how many any individual is carrying, just the total amount between the squad. Samples extracted are shared though, but the game still has a problem with newbies not really understanding this and mugging other players trying to steal them. Samples, and sometimes even rec slips, are needed for ship module upgrades. Some of these are impactful, a few of them are incredible, but most are useless or very small statistical upgrades that matter in theory, but you pretty much won't notice. Like, a 5% cooldown reduction for all stratagems is mathematically very strong, but do you care? Conversely, going 3 deep into the hangar upgrade gives you an additional use of the 500 kilogram bomb per rearm. That's a game changer. Notably, ship module upgrades have a visible component. Upgrades can be seen to have been installed in the Super Destroyer, and your Super Destroyer is your multiplayer hub. And people know how expensive these upgrades are, so a certain amount of glamour is implied. You may just want to get all of these in order to have them, and therefore have the shiniest ship. You can also donate samples to the general warfront in order to provide buffs in certain conflict zones. This is the solution the devs cooked up to allow players who are progress capped on samples to still have a reason to collect them. And of course, democracy being democracy, this means you can vote not only on where the fight is, but vote with your wallet to determine how well it's going. Your virtual wallet, that is. You can't microtransaction the Terminids away. Speaking of, the last 2 resources are pretty intertwined: Warbond medals and super credits. Super credits are the premium currency. You can buy them for real money, and they are what unlocks additional battle passes that contain new cosmetics, weapons, armors, boosters, all that good stuff you spend Warbond medals on. So, between the 2 of these, it must be immediately obvious which of these 2 currencies is most difficult to acquire and highly sought after. It's the Warbond medals. Progressing a battle pass means that items individually cost more and more medals, and in order to progress you have to spend a specific amount of medals on the items you have available so far. So progress is very regulated, and you can't just beeline towards specific things. You pretty much have to get all of it. You can skip a few things, but not much. You can focus on the items of actual consequence like equipment, but you will have to buy some cosmetics just to see the next page. Like, seriously, this Warbond page literally cannot be progressed until you buy the exosuit skin. Why are you doing this to me? The funny thing about this is that you cap out at 250 medals, so you need to be constantly spending them, but the cost per page of a battle pass can be frightfully high. The standard Warbond that comes free with the game has a total cost of 2,000 medals. And premium Warbonds that are purchased with super credits end up having a total medal cost of between 550 and 850 medals. That's just to get everything though. It's less than half that in order to just get access to every page. Each Warbond also contains a certain amount of super credits as a refund for the super credits you spent buying it. Premium Warbonds cost 1,000 super credits to purchase, but refund 300 by the time they are completed. The standard Warbond jumpstarts you with 750 super credits in this way, and it's not really uncommon to find somewhere between 10 to 50 super credits per mission if someone is scraping all of the points of interest. You can also very rarely get a 100 super credit pile, but it's pretty rare. Only happening to me about 4 times in the amount of play that it took me to grind out all the super credits I needed for all the premium Warbonds. This means that all you really need to do is find 700 super credits somewhere in the time it takes you to accumulate the 600-ish war bonds needed to complete the one you just unlocked. If you're impatient, I guess you can spend real money to unlock all the war bonds, but really, you'll only be able to purchase items from the first page with any kind of speed. This basically means that while super credits can be purchased for money, you're actually putting yourself at a bit of a disadvantage by doing so. Democratic Detonation is kind of accepted as the first premium war bond you should acquire, since the Thermite Grenade and Grenade Pistol open up your options for primary and support weapons a lot. But from there you can progress generally at your own ease, and honestly not be missing out that much. I really like the options offered by Steel Veterans, and also the Masters of Ceremony war bond, well, functionally not that great, has some genuinely fun cosplaying potential. The Super Citizen version just contains a token to open a war bond of your choice. Pretty nifty, but not really worth the money unless you just want to support the developer. Premium war bonds aren't really purchasing power, it's more about pursuing a style, and in that way it's just a stretch goal to convince you to play the game more, and it does a good job at that because the rate at which war bond medals are acquired is somewhat fixed, and will typically be trailing behind your super credit acquisition. End up with an abundance of super credits and you can always spend them on cosmetics on the Superstore, which has a rotating stock and doesn't need medals, but that's basically where you go once you have all premium war bonds unlocked and are still getting credits. Be advised though, keep 1000 super credits in your pocket because they release new war bonds all the time. To get war bond medals you can do a daily objective for exactly 15, wait on the community to complete a major order for like 45, or you can find them in bunches and points of interest like rare samples, rec slips, and super credits. Or you can get them from mission completion rewards. Higher difficulties get more medals, but most importantly, you get more medals per mission if you progress a campaign. Okay, I'm about to call them campaigns a lot. In-game they're referred to as operations, just keep that in mind. Campaigns unlock at medium difficulty, and at hard they progress to their final form of being 3 different missions on the same planet against the same enemy. Most people play extreme difficulty, but at hard difficulty the first mission you clear in a campaign pays out 4 medals, the second 6, and the third 8. So the final mission pays literally twice as many medals in exchange for having to do them all in a row. Medal grinding is likely most efficiently done by spamming the same automaton eradication mission hundreds of times with a dedicated team at a very high difficulty level. But for casual play, you should just start doing all 3 missions in a campaign of your choice at extreme difficulty to get the reasonable rewards and not miss out. It's also not uncommon to find more medals in loot drops than the mission that dropped them would normally pay. Speaking of difficulty, Helldivers has 10 of them, and they are sectioned into difficulty tiers. Trivial, easy, and medium are all basically tutorial missions. This is tier 1. These don't drop rare or super samples, and for this reason, they actually have a pretty significant place in the grinding meta, since the points of interest that spawn in these missions are more likely to spawn medals and super credits. This is a decent way to get medals, but it is the best way to get credits. Just be advised that hopping into the first few games of a new player experience may mean they misbehave. This is kinda where the children hang out. I'll cover low difficulty super credit grinding methods in a moment. Challenging difficulty is the first real point of friction, and I'd say that when you're first starting out, you can stick to this difficulty for a while until you unlock more of the game's gear progression, and get a firm grasp of the rhythm of play. This is the start of Tier 2. It's easy without feeling patronizing. For more experienced players, extreme difficulty is referred to as the comfy dive. It can get pretty hairy, but if you know what you're doing, victory is still fairly guaranteed. You have a generous respawn budget, you can get super samples, and the XP and rec slip modifier is fat. The enemies also really scale up both in size and scope, with some of the really big boys coming out to play here and there. Seriously, on extreme difficulty, you'll see nonsense like 3 tanks clipping into each other just to get the best shot at a full party kill. It's hilarious. Extreme difficulty is also the difficulty where all the challenge achievements become available, so it kinda feels like the developer-intended game state. I completed my first difficulty 7 mission without even realizing I wasn't playing extreme, and after that basically skipped right on past difficulties 8 and 9 to get the full Super Helldive experience. And it actually barely feels harder. All this to say that difficulty 6 is functionally the medium difficulty of any other game, and it is the place to be where you won't really be missing out on content, but also don't have to sweat too hard. Still might be a bit too much for new players, but this is where I hang out just to chill and do dailies. In order to unlock a new difficulty level, you need to complete a campaign on your current highest difficulty. Or a friend or random player can bring you into a higher difficulty campaign. So long as you complete it from start to finish, you'll skip any tiers in between, which can save a lot of time. There are 3 enemy factions to fight, all of which usually have some war zones at any given time, and each of them rewards a certain playstyle. In my first 2 weeks, I fought exclusively the automatons because it was where the war was at the time, but you can fight anyone anytime, you just won't be where the cool kids are. The automatons, also called the bots, offer a playstyle that is probably closest to that of a traditional war against an armed enemy. They have guns, rocket launchers, tanks, legally distinct AT-ATs, legally distinct AT-STs, and the recently stealth-dropped ED-209s. They have a primary focus on being heavily armored. That being said, they also have 12-foot-tall mechs with chainsaw hands and flamethrowers and will run directly at you. Knowing and nailing the weak points is vital for bots. For instance, Scout Striders can be easily killed with medium armor penetrating arms by shooting them in the dick. It's not initially obvious that this works, but it's the best way to get rid of them. Most other enemies have glowing red weak spots, just as you'd expect. Bot fabricators can be destroyed with stratagems or a well-placed non-impact grenade in these vents, which exist both on small and large fabricators. Grenade launchers will also do the trick, and thermite to any part of the building should also work on the small ones. Automatons are my favorite faction to fight because while they feel very strong, they also feel fairly predictable and balanced, unless you're getting tagged by a detector tower. In Super Helldive against the bots, the Quasar Cannon is a practical necessity. It has a 30-second windup and a 15-second cooldown, but it has unlimited ammo and functionally deletes one tank, Hulk, or Walker from the game, and can also take out small fabricators. Terminids, also known as bugs, are your classic Starship Troopers alien bugs. Dumb as bricks, but about as tough. Your average bug isn't as tough to take down as a bot, and they aren't heavily armored, and therefore are vulnerable to a wide variety of weaponry, including a specific weakness to fire and energy weapons. Don't be mistaken. Larger bugs absolutely have seriously armored shells and will need heavy ordnance to punch through, but it's nowhere on the same scale as the bots. Where bugs make up for this is in numbers and speed. They dart around so fast it can be hard to keep track of them all, and since they don't explode, it can be hard to tell if one is really dead. Throw grenades in their bug holes, the tutorial taught you that. Since the bugs are enemies you face in the tutorial, I'd say they are probably the easiest of the 3 factions to fight, but their frantic nature and sheer numbers can be a bit much. And while being swarmed on all sides can be thrilling, you probably also don't want to fight nothing but them for days at a time. As for the Illuminate, I don't know what the hell is going on over here. Protoss, but also zombies? Take in what you need to destroy heavy armor, but also be prepared to hose down literally thousands of bullet sponge easy targets. Engage in an urban environment that hates orbital lasers and also be prepared to be the target of incoming stratagem fire. Use attacks that decimate wide areas in order to manage crowd control, but we're docking your pay if you kill civilians. Medium armor enemies in hover packs that ignore ground explosions and have ridiculous health pools. Flesh mobs that are just gigantic bundles of hit points, with no regard for its own survival or the fundamentals of physics, like whether there is a wall between you and them. Enemy airships that will do strafing runs on you until you kill them with heavy ordnance, while being too far off the ground and too fast for orbital weapons. War of the World Striders with energy shields that need to be focused down with high DPS weapons, but the Strider itself needs armor piercing. I've put some time in on Super Helldive with the Illuminate, and the answer appears to be an MG43 machine gun or don't bother. The gun has the medium armor piercing to deal with overseers and well-aimed shots against harvester joints, and the DPS to take down shields and flesh mobs before they reach you. Sometimes. If there's 2 of them though, I don't think the Illuminate are terribly popular, and a 5-minute trip to the subreddit pretty solidly confirmed that suspicion. I initially really tore into the Illuminate for being too hard, but upon putting a few dozen more hours into them at Diff 10, their balance is just bizarre. Their difficulty barely scales with difficulty level. I find them about as threatening at Trivial as I do at Super Helldive, which is absolutely insane. I mean, Stingrays and Flesh Mobs spawn at difficulty 1, and the full roster is in play at difficulty 3. What the hell is this? Thankfully, if you don't like a specific faction, you can just not fight them. The game features a real-time background simulation, a comically inaccurate geocentric galaxy map within which all planets in the galaxy have their day-night cycle determined by which side of them is currently facing Super-Earth. I can only guess as to what causes the day-night cycle on Super-Earth itself. You can fight pretty much anything so long as there are enemies currently occupying or attacking the planet, but Helldivers tend to group together or collectively liberate or defend incursions on the same planet by voting for focus to be placed in a specific area, and then major orders will also provide incentives to do certain things in certain places. Helldivers can completely ignore the major orders to do their own thing, and often do, sometimes with awful consequences. The Democracy Space Station is a floating super destroyer that can be voted across the galaxy, and if funded with enough samples, can provide bonus stratagems to missions on a certain planet. This is a great way for the community to really push the completion of a specific goal. And the community voting to park it in a location that the major order is not related to is frankly hilarious. This is managed democracy though, so remember that even if we all vote one way, the man at the switch can just decide that we meant to vote the other way. Whether the storyline of the game is truly dynamic based on the actions of the player base, or simply an audience participation stage play in which everything is actually faked, well, that's a debate I could do without. The spirit of the game doesn't invite tinfoil hats so much as it does blind obedience, and I think we're all generally cool with that so long as there are sufficient bread and circuses. Who cares that when I went to bed last night we were 25% through a 50,000 mission quota, and when I woke up we were 75% through a 25,000 mission quota? This is managed democracy. We can move the goalposts all day. This is all an incredibly complicated and long-winded way to say that this is a fantastic game to drop in once per day, play 3 games, scrounge for some bonuses, and peace out while feeling like you are part of something a bit bigger. There's depth for those who want it, although not too much, and the whole thing is pretty chill. I completely missed the first 14 months of the game and didn't really miss out on much, except for a weapon from some bizarre Killzone crossover. Battle passes are permanent content here, you can't miss them, and the Superstore rotates regularly so there's no real FOMO. Well, almost no FOMO. Now, since each battle pass needs 1000 super credits, I'll close out this video with a guide on grinding them. You need like 14,000 for all available war bonds as of the release of this video, and that's not as much of a grind as you'd think. I've finished multiple Anima weapons in 14, I'm a Saint of the Firmament. I've content completed Deep Rock Galactic. I at one point was max MR in Warframe, and I unlocked and maxed all the professions in Red Dead Online without paying a cent for gold bars. I am quadruple elite in Elite Dangerous, the grindiest game I think has ever existed. This shit ain't nothing to me, man. I literally grinded enough super credits to unlock all 14 premium war bonds in a single week, and now I can just play the game for fun. Rec slips, medals, and super credits are party shared, which is why people generally don't mind if a light-equipped scout decides to go rogue and hit up all the POIs. You do this by checking your map for areas that don't have enemy outposts or already discovered mission objectives, and checking it out in person. There are special scout builds specifically for jungling for loot like this, and super credit farming at difficulties 1 through 3 is pretty common. Low difficulty grinding is best done at least in pairs, and basically just means equipping your fastest light armor and the jump pack and fast recon vehicle stratagems, dropping into a non-eradication mission, scooping up all the drops, and then abandoning without completing the mission objective. If you do complete the mission objective, you now have to extract. It's kind of inconvenient. Be advised that calling down an FRV means that the Pelican making the drop will take anti-tank pot shots at anything within a few hundred meters, especially in illegal broadcast missions. This can accidentally lead to mission completion. Try to avoid it. There are various sources of loot, and a loot drop will either be a support weapon that does not need a backpack, rec slips, medals, or super credits. Obviously, support weapons are the booby prize, and many people don't even bother picking up the rec slips. Rescue pods contain one drop of loot and can be seen from a very far distance by the pulsing beam of light they emit into the sky. But not all sources of loot do this, and for those you need to look for the question mark on your compass, and basically just vibe out your radar. Many points of interest will be shown in the map if you mouse over them, others can be more elusive. After a point of interest is found, it changes to one of two symbols on the radar. If the POI has a diamond icon, it means that there is still some kind of loot that can be acquired, be it a sample or super credits or something. Exhausted POIs then change to a grayed out map marker. Many points of interest don't have a giant golden loot beacon, but instead have one of these, what looks like a standard cargo container door embedded in a wall. These can be opened with any explosive. Impact grenades are my favorite when farming for these. Once exploded, these contain 2 loot drops. Be careful though, many of these come in pits that contain flammable containers, which will cover the area in fire, which makes it unsafe to approach your loot for like 20 seconds. You can avoid this by throwing the containers out of the pit, although arguably it takes about as long to do that as it does to wait out the fire. You can also use a laser cannon to destroy the container doors without setting the place on fire, but that takes the effort of calling down a support weapon. These cargo containers are probably the juiciest source because they are pretty common and anyone can pick them up. The only point of friction to jungling like this is if you find a bunker, because they need 2 people to open, and their 3 loot spawns can contain as many as 30 super credits or 3 piles of metals. Bunkers don't emit the beam of light, and also their POIs are listed as exhausted as soon as you find them, so they are easy to miss. But they are worth checking out every time. You don't even have to survive getting this stuff, you just have to touch it and everybody gets it whether or not the mission even succeeds. If you're grinding specifically for super credits and want to determine if a bunker is worth it, then you can go prone against the door and use aim down sights to sneak a peek at the contents. I wouldn't normally give in to this kind of exploit, but when you're potentially wasting minutes of up to 3 other people's time, it's just polite to make sure you aren't calling them from across the map to help you get 2 flamethrowers and a rec slip. From there, it's generally fastest to just say bunker. If other players are particularly far away, they should stand on their own grenades and then use the reinforcement stratagem to fast travel to your location. Breaking news! You no longer need 2 players to loot a bunker. The Warp Pack stratagem that was released during the production of this video allows individual players to teleport through the bunker door and grab all that good stuff. It's actually faster than even waiting for the door to open, and the Warp Pack is pretty fast for getting around. Super credit and metal grinding has just been revolutionized. Some bonus tips for jungling for fat loot is that you'll probably want to take some scout armor. Not all scout armor has the same movement bonuses, and the Boba Fett armor is the fastest that is available from the starter warbond. You'll die pretty much instantly, but you can mitigate that somewhat with an energy shield backpack. The light armor from the Truth Enforcer warbond is probably the best for this, because it has more health and prevents flinching, but a lot of people run the light armor from the Masters of Ceremony, including myself. In low difficulty where dying is less of an issue, a jump pack should be used. Fast recon vehicles live up to their name. They are fast. Irresponsibly fast. Breaking your own bones and flipping over permanently if you drive over a pebble fast. Learning to drive an FRV can take a minute, but my advice is that you should try to keep your speed low and coast on momentum a lot, as a lot of the instability comes from the lack of slip differential, which means that trying to accelerate without all 4 wheels on the ground can make you spin out. The FRV has 5 gears, none of which are park, but you can activate the handbrake while exiting to ensure the damn thing doesn't slide into the ocean, which happened to me a lot. Manually shifting gear ratio will also limit your speed, allowing it to be driven somewhat more carefully through rocky terrain, which is most biomes if we're being honest. Drive 1 will make it sound like your engine is about to explode, but will also make the vehicle easier to control. Remember that in an FRV, slower is faster. You don't need to gun it, you just need to beat sprint speed and not have to worry about stamina. Nothing wastes time like trying to save time. LiDAR stations are your friend for grinding loot. If you see one, you should beeline to it and get it up and running. It'll ping all points of interest on the map, which eliminates all the guesswork. Points of interest in city environments are glitched to always appear as though they contain loot on the minimap. Which sucks, but they do sometimes still contain rescue pods, so look for the golden beam of light. In the Super City urban maps, you can pretty much kiss your chances at free medals and super credits goodbye, at least in my experience. Bunkers and rescue pods can technically exist there, but barely worth mentioning, and I've never seen a cargo container. Finally, if you've never used a stim when low on stamina just to sprint from one location to the next faster, then you don't love democracy. If you don't have sprint-focused boosters, then it's worth taking in a Hellpod space optimization booster just for the bonus stamina from stims. There's even a booster that gives a move speed bonus after using a stim, and another booster that lets you consume health to sprint for longer, both of which really synergize with using stims for stamina recovery in a scout build. But for super credit farming, a well-driven FRV will beat this clean, so long as the terrain isn't absolutely terrible. The Vitality booster also dramatically reduces the health loss from the dead sprint booster, but you also can't go wrong with the classic stamina booster. Done well, grinding thousands of super credits and hundreds of medals at difficulty 1 takes no time at all. But it is kinda dull. I don't know, put on Netflix or something. You can pay for a war bond with just an afternoon of focused grinding with randoms. I found it useful to drop in for this shortly after a new war bond is announced, as high-level players will be back at the grind to pay for the new one. You don't need to do this. It really only matters if there's stuff in those war bonds that you actually want, or if you're just a completionist. Premium war bonds are mostly about flavor, and while I do commonly use weapons and armor from premium war bonds, you can treat them as stretch goals, as an excuse to enjoy playing the game for longer rather than an absolute necessity. After all, every new war bond is a hell of a lot more medals to acquire. Speaking of, I found that in the time it would take me to grind 1000 super credits using the low difficulty method, I would get approximately enough medals to hit the second page of the new war bond that I could now afford.